And back. Yes. Your screen keeps jumping around my OBS. I don't know what it is. It's so strange.
That
Yeah.
is
So we
weird.
were at Gladiators.
Yeah, so the player, replaces one of these roles and
Yeah.
does it like I tell them, and just like is like, no, it's actually after the game. One player came up to me, and and to be fair, I knew that this player, because this is my player who's like super obsessed with D
Okay.
and D. Oh my god, so obsessed, like and really rules obsessed too. Um, and he came up to me after he's like, yeah, I kind of know she did the thing with that roll there. I think you were just taking it easy on us. And I was like, well, maybe. And the next session, the diviner who was helping them shows up, and it's a character they've already met. It's a character they had met
Oh.
like 6 sessions previously and had interactions with. And he was like, oh, and I was like, that's where you got your help from. And he's like, oh, and I was like, yeah, you thought I was going easy on you. Nope, that was a story plot. Like, it was a plot hook that became also part of the encounter. And that's kind of that is what I have learned to do now, which I think is a bit more of a it's a bit more subtle. Like, to be fair, I'm not above fudging die rolls. Still, I will happily do it.
It's not necessary
But
as much.
no, yeah, no, I've gotten a bit more dexterous about figuring out how to put those things in ahead of time and prep them so that they always seem
Yeah.
reasonable, or they always are generated from somewhere else in the game or the plot or the narrative, where the players will buy it and be like, right, that makes sense. That should happen there, and it
Yeah.
feels satisfying. Um, and that's yeah. And like I said, like that's the juice. Like if you can get players invested enough where they feel like that world is it doesn't have to be
Yeah.
realistic. It just has to be real enough for
It's
them
it's
to
a movie
buy
world.
it.
You're playing a movie.
It is. And I tell players that before we start playing. I'm like, my games tend to be a lot more cinematic than
Yeah.
simulation. Some DMs run simulation games. I'm not one of those
Would it be a
guys,
more
but
simulation game?
you know, I think hardcore
Oh,
dungeon
yeah.
crawls tend to be a bit more
You
simulation,
just go by the numbers.
like because then, yep, yeah, it's all by the numbers and like the puzzles and stuff. Actually, I think this is one of the reasons I don't tend to use like puzzles and riddles that often, is because those are in a very real way not a challenge for the characters, they're a challenge for the
Oh,
players,
yeah.
right? Because optimally, right, like if you were running it strictly according to Hoyle, you put a puzzle in front of the players, and if they don't get it, they can say, well, my character's going to roll intelligence and figure
Yeah.
this out, which kind of should be an
Yeah.
option.
Makes sense.
And a DM, most DMs would never say yes to that. Most DMs would be like, no, you just got to figure it out.
Technically speaking,
um right. and
I'm
and 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 I'm kind of, because I like that paradox to me is, I'm kind of like, I don't know that I really need puzzles in most of my games. Like, my games have things for you to figure out, but they are things for you to figure out that
problems, not
um
puzzles.
are, yeah, yeah, they're much more problems and situations, and things where the link between player knowledge and character knowledge is
Yeah.
much closer,
Yeah.
right?
'Cause
um
you can roll that type of
yeah.
character. You can roll like I 18
Yeah.
18 int or whatever. I put down in my thiefy characters like 16 dex or whatever it is, but I ain't dexy in real life.
Right, yeah,
Like,
yeah,
it's
exactly.
not gonna roll this way.
Right, yeah, and like, yeah, in those situations, it's like, I want your stats to matter. I want your stats to have an impact. And I really like, there's some stuff that like 5e has put in, that I think is actually more common in a lot of games now, but it mimics something that I used to have to do a long way. So, like perception rolls and investigation checks. In 5e, there is a stat. You have stats called your passive, like perception check, or passive
Okay.
investigation, or passive insight. And basically, what it is it's basically like, you remember the old like 3-5 system of like taking 10 or
Mm-mm.
taking 20. So there used to be a system in like 3.5 where you would say like, this is an action I want to take. I don't want to roll for it. I have enough skill, so I'm just going to take longer. It's not combat, right? So I'm just going to take 10.
Oh.
Which means it's like I'm taking the average roll and running with it. So like picking a lock. If you're picking a lock and you're not under like some time constraint, there's not guards breathing down your neck. Like I'm gonna take 10. I'm just gonna pick this lock, but I'm not gonna roll for it.
Yep. It fits your skill level, fits his character.
Right. So in 5e, the passive check system is similar. It is influenced by your stats. So if you have a really high, wisdom score or whatever, you'll have a really high passive insight check, or a really high, passive perception or passive investigation check. But what it allows me to do as the DM is, if I know everyone's passive score, if a goblin is tailing you, and I roll stealth for the goblin, I don't have to then tell you roll perception. Because if I do and you roll too low, well, your character doesn't know that they missed something, but you as the player know that you missed something. Whereas now I can just roll the goblin stealth and then look at your sheet, and say, nope, you didn't see that. And I don't have to tell you. But the other way works too, right? So like I can roll it and look at your sheet and go like, oh yeah, you definitely see it, and to be like, you hear footfalls behind you, that kind of like, it's a nice like subtle thing that they've put in to solve a problem. And the way I used to handle that was, if I really wanted to hide something from you but still be fair, I would look at my players' sheets and pre-roll a bunch of perception checks and have them written down and cross them off as we were playing. And so it's just a nice way that it's like, oh no, the system has done this work for me. I don't have to do it anymore.
Makes a lot of sense.
And it's cool because if you're really paying attention as a DM, your players will be good at different things. So in like my home game, like one of my players has a stupefyingly high, or not stupefying high, but it's high passive perception, and I have another player who has a really high passive insight. And so I've started trying to keep this in mind so that I'll have one player notice like, hidden traps or things like that, and I'll have another player notice like hidden motivations. Like, and I'll just tell them, be like, this person seems duplicitous to you. Like, the others aren't picking up on this, but you, like, this seems a little weird to you.
Makes sense.
And that way, like, hopefully that's translating to the players as, like, things that their characters are just good at. Like, in my home game, my cleric is just good at reading people. And so, as we go on, like, I'm trying to integrate that more, where, like, they'll have conversations about, like, you kind of understand this person. You're this is the vibe you're getting off them, and I'm trying to think of that as, like, their ongoing passive insight, because they're just insightful.
That's a cool new system for that. It makes a lot of sense.
I like it. There's a lot of 5e mechanics that I feel like are like hard won by DMs who have had problems at tables for years. They're like, I want to fix this problem, and then they've done it. I think they've done a lot of things in there that really do fix some of those like
That's
ongoing
like
so issues.
Goddamn popular now, besides Stranger Things.
Yeah, besides like Stranger Things and like Critical Role.
Once they get into it, it's not a goddamn nightmare. I like trying to balance
and like I said, like,
and working that out. Like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Thaco was hard. 3.5, I mean, like, 3.5 had so many options, and they were all cool, but the thing about all of the options that it had on it, all the bells and whistles, were that, man, it was just so rules intensive. There's so much crunch. It's like, I don't know if you remember this, in like 3.5, in 3.5, the monster manual, any monster, there was like a template rating for it.
Oh, yeah.
So basically what it was like, I want to play a silver dragon. And 3.5 was like, cool, this is what that means. If you play a silver dragon, you are equivalent to a 7th level character
Oh,
at
wow.
start. And it was like a template, and it allowed you to make characters out of any of the monster races, which was a cool idea, and I thought that was neat. And that's one of the things I think, maybe there's a way to bring that over from 3.5. But the flip side of that was that, that's a lot. That becomes a lot of rules to keep track of as a DM. And it becomes a lot more balancing and headache. And I'm kind of like, that was a cool idea. That was a neat option, but I totally see why it was dropped. I get it.
Do you like? So Thaco, remember, to hit AC 0.
Yeah, to
so
hit
the
armor class
idea
0.
was you as a player wanted a negative number.
Yeah, lower numbers are better, as I recall.
You can get into the negatives.
Yeah.
We did.
It's been, to be fair, it's been a good 26 years, I think, since I've played. At least 22 years since I've played 2nd edition. So
that's one of the few things I remember, and being able to do character sheets on loose leaf paper.
Yeah. Oh man, I remember those character sheets being really
it was a lot.
dense.
It took a while to fill it all in.
It really was. Some days like the RPG community sort of poo-poos the White Wolf stuff, and I understand some of those complaints now, but wow, I could build one of those characters in 5 minutes.
So easy. It was great. And the bigger the number, the better. That was it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was so straightforward. I really do like it, and still kind of miss it to this day.
We played. Well, we got to what we played the most. Adventure, right?
Adventure and Trinity were the two I played. Yeah. I ran the most. Probably Adventure.
I tried to play a little bit more. Every time we played White Wolf, it was like it was like The Crow, the movie. Constantly, it was always nighttime. There was some sort of like warfare going on.
Yeah.
But that was the adventure game we played was pulp, and it was a lot more. It was adventure. It was a lot more, but it's not like D&D adventure.
No, that game was kind of intentionally like Hellboy minus Hellboy. Like, yeah, it was like, your intrepid 20s pulp, heroes fighting the supernatural and that kind of thing, it was a lot of fun. I like that game a lot.
And then, do you like your homebrew stuff? Do you like just dabbling in every once in a while? Do you like to?
I mean, are you talking like systems or like?
I guess, but you do more homebrew like worlds, I guess, and you modify systems.
Yeah, I do much more. Yeah, I do much more homebrew settings than I do systems. Like, I've thought about homebrewing systems before, and I've like talked to friends about it every now and again, and I get into it, and I'm like, I think I could do it well enough. I'm just too lazy.
It's not your forte.
Well, it's just not my. It's not something I'm super interested in. Like, I'm much happier taking, like, okay, here's a structure, a mechanical structure, and saying, all right, well, can I make it do the thing I want it to do to give me this dramatic
That's how we played
outcome.
Star Wars. It was a modified adventure game.
Right. It was an adventure game, yeah. It was, and because adventure, like, all you had to do was make like 3 tweaks to that game, and they were small tweaks, and it would run Star Wars perfectly.
I remember. I was
great.
You showed me all the different powers and how it would work. I'm like, yep, that's everything.
Yeah. Yeah, and what was great too is like it would run Star Wars, and I never got to do it, but I wanted to run a Batman game, like a Gotham City, like, and the idea was going to be it was Gotham City minus Batman. Like, there was going to be something that had taken Batman away, and you were going to be playing like street level crime fighters who were taking up the slack in the lack of system. Batman.
Like, to play with that kind of Dick Tracy shadow. Well.
Yeah, it won't replicate like Justice League superheroics very well, but it would perfectly do like the weirdness of a standard Batman comic.
See that.
Yeah, and I always wanted to run that for adventure, and I still kind of do because I still think it would be a lot of fun. And yeah, and
I
it did
remember
Star Wars
playing a game in
uh-huh.
Adventure because it's 20s. I was essentially Captain America. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked out really, really well. This is,
Yeah. It really like for like that, especially like the borderline between like high end pulp and very street level superheroes. Like Adventure is a great game to replicate that.
street level
Really
superheroes
good.
is just pulp.
Yeah. That is kind of true.
That's where the roots come from. Let's be real.
Yeah. It is. Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, so back in the days when Superman literally leapt tall buildings, he couldn't fly. He just jumped really high. Back in the day. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I remember playing those, and those were fun. Yeah. The supernatural part, and it was. I don't think Adventure was supernaturally, but I guess it all translated.
It had a little bit, but not. I put a whole lot more into it. Like at base, the White Wolf's game Adventure was about more like Dick Tracy, The Shadow, The Rocketeer, Indiana Jones. Like it was built to replicate those. But you know, I liked Hellboy a whole lot, and so I was like, I want to do supernatural retro pulp, and so that's what I put into it. And basically what I would do is, because it was all D10 system, I would take the stat blocks from stuff in like Vampire or Bygone Bestiary, the stuff from Age, and I would just say, well, what do I have to do to make this into an adventure sheet? Very little, and just drop it in, and it would work like a dream. So yeah, I mean, like, yeah, I tend to like to do that, where I'll take a system that as it exists already and be like, how do I monkey with this? And I mean, like, even now, like the D&D games I'm running, they are standard D&D, like there's that, but they are I do have a custom setting, and the custom setting has an effect on certain elements of the game. Namely, it has an effect on like the lore and backstory of like the different things out. Character ancestries. Yeah. So like in my setting, like I tell them up front, I'm like, just so you know, like there are things that are different about this setting than standard D&D. Like Drow are not automatically assumed to be evil. They're just another kind of elf. They happen to live in a different place, but don't like. There's no like spider queen that they worship, and they're all evil monsters.
That's cool.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. It sounds like I remember when in Robert Rodriguez movies, he always said he just puts the character in a world, and the characters kind of do their own thing. I always felt like storytelling was kind of the same way, or Dungeon Master was kind of the same way. You built the backbone, and you let the characters go, because they're supposed to be, and let them do what they want. And then, like you say, you're just reacting at that point. So let them run their thing.
Yeah, and I feel like it's a good. I feel like it's a good way to run, particularly if you're running a custom setting. You're not like a custom story, and you're not doing like a module. It's a really good way to ground your narrative, because you're grounding it in other characters in the world, and it gives you the ability, because a lot of people are like, I'm really bad at improv, and I'm like, yeah, improv is hard, but improv is much, much easier if you already have a baseline in your head of who is this guy, right? Like if I told you, I want you to improv a character in a sci-fi universe, go. There's so many options there, right? But if I told you, I want you to improv the next 5 minutes as Han Solo, you will have a much better idea of how to do that. Yeah. Like, I have given you a bounded set of parameters, and you're like, okay, if I'm Han Solo, I'm not going to go waka waka, like, that won't really fit. Because
I can see Harrison Ford doing that.
Oh yeah, totally, yeah. But that's not that character, so you kind of already know, all right, well, he would do this in that situation. Yeah. He would be the cool guy, like the cool rogue. And I think that, like, you only need that much.
Guess, especially now, it's really inherent with everybody, because a lot of people are, especially just recently, I think, with television, you have characters that run for a long time. So you understand the character development, you understand the character's motives, you have a longer lasting impression. So when they do something off character, it really is really jarring. at that point. Because it's like, wait, this doesn't fit.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
the cool thing, I remember, was it Watterson that does Calvin and Hobbes, right? I remember because I had one of his books, and he starts out an arc where Calvin is a really good kid. It's like, hi, Mom, I did the dishes, I did my homework.
Oh, right.
And he says, you can only pull this off until way later. Like, you have to establish that character first.
Yeah,
so when
yeah.
you see something very awkward, it creates a weird point. So you can use it as a character point to pivot on.
Yeah, you have to give them the control case.
Yeah,
This is what normal is. And so once you know what normal is, I can now introduce abnormal, and you will instantly get it, and I don't have to tell you why it's strange.
You ever have a player like just bork a day or a session by doing something? Like, man, I gotta redo. Like, all right.
I'm sure I have. Not recently. I did have a player. I don't know if I told you about this. I had a player recently do the hardest heel turn, the hardest, fastest heel turn I have ever seen at a table, and it was awesome. And I'm so sad. It was the last session that we did of the university game before Corona happened. But man, it like his character. His character had like a very tropey backstory. He was a guy who lived in a village, and some raiders came to his village, and they killed his whole family. And so now he was on a vengeance quest, right? And there's a couple of different ways to do that. The basic way is to play it like John Wick, where the challenge for that character is, they eventually find the motherfuckers that did that. And then the challenge is, how many ways can you kill these guys in as quick a succession as possible? That's one way to do that and make that a satisfying story, and it would work. But I like intrigue, and I like character drama. And so I went the other way, which is he comes upon a situation where he and the party are traveling through this town. And keep in mind, the party does not know this backstory. He's on a vengeance quest, but nobody else knows
it. That's the worst, like, road trip buddy. No.
Yeah. And so they've picked up a follower. They picked up a little, like, commoner dude, and they're like, we want to train this guy because we want this commoner to be like our sidekick. Okay. He's going to be like our mascot. But if he gets to combat, he's tissue paper. We need to buff him up. And so they're like, we need to train him, but everybody in that half of the group were all casters.
Yeah.
So they couldn't train him in sword. They're like, well, what are we going to do? Well, let's find somebody in this town that we just came into and see if anybody can teach him swordplay. And so I was like, okay, cool. And they find a guy in town that teaches them swordplay, and they pay the guy, and he starts training him. And I slip a note to my player, and I'm like... And this guy who they find, he's like a farmer. He's like a farmer, but he's like, oh yeah, I used to be a soldier. And he's got like a wife, and he's got these two, small kids, bouncy, cute small kids. And I kind of really play that up. And they pay him, and he's like, okay, well, come over here. And he starts training the guy. And as I like have transitioned to that, where like, oh, he's training them, I slip the player a note, and I'm like, he's one of them. He's one of the guys that did it to your family. And to his credit, the player after that session came to me and was like, I see what you're doing. Like he's like retired now, right? Like he's like having a nice life. And the question is whether or not I'm going to kill him. And I'm like, yes,
yeah, that's it.
That's exactly what you have correctly identified this trope. Good job.
GG.
And we talked about it for weeks, literally, because this was like 3 sessions of this. And he and I would talk about it between sessions, and he's like, I don't know. I think should I kill his whole family to like show him, or? And I was like, I don't know. I was like, that'd be pretty evil, but you're not like fighting the party or anything. Like this is a character choice. Who's your character going to be? And we kind of got to the day of, and we had talked, and he had told me before the session, he was like, okay, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and, like, sneak into the dude's house and, like, take him out. But just him. And I was like, okay, that's a very, like, I'm on a vengeance quest, but I'm still a hero, kind of. It's very Kill Bill, right? It's very the bride from Kill Bill. And I was like, okay, cool, that's fine. And so we start playing. And at some point in the session, he's like, the other players, like, they've been, watching this guy, like, train their buddy. And, like, the training session ends. And the other players are like, okay, we're all going to go turn in at the tavern. And this player's like, I'm going to stay behind. And the other players are like, huh? And he's like, I'm going to stay behind. And he ends up having dinner with the family. And the players know something is wrong now. Like, they're like, this is, what's going on? And so he has dinner with the family. And the players get that there's something sinister happening. And I'm like, and they play it and they have dinner and, like, it's nice. And it's kind of this sweet scene. And then I take the player out of the room for a second. And I was like, okay, here's the deal. Because he's about to do his ambush. And I know it. And I tell him, okay, do you want to play this scene in front of the other players or not? Because they're not here.
Technically speaking, yeah.
Their characters won't see this. So we can play this outside and they won't know what happens. And they'll just see the aftermath. Or we can play it in front of them. And he's like, no, let's go ahead and play it in front of them. Oh my god. Bad choice. No. So here's what actually happens. So they have dinner, and he leaves. He pretends to leave. And he's like, okay, later on that night, when I'm sure they're asleep, I sneak into the house. And he'd figured it out. He's like, I have these abilities. I'm going to do these things. And he'd set it up. He's like, I'm going to sneak in, because he's a bard. He's like, I'm pretty sneaky. I'll sneak in, and then I'm going to stab the dude while he's asleep, back as far away from him as possible, and cast sleep on that area of the house. Because as soon as I stab him, everyone's going to wake up. I cast sleep, and that's going to knock at least the wife and the kids out. And he's like, and I'm going to cast it really high level and hope to knock him out. And if I can knock him out, then I've got him at my mercy. I can drag him away and do my villainous, or my vengeful speech.
Yeah.
You killed my family. I'm like, cool, it's a great idea. What actually happens is he sneaks in, works well. He goes and he stabs the guy in his sleep, hits him good, backs off, casts his high-level sleep. It knocks the family out. It knocks the kid. One out, kid 2 out, mom, and it comes 2 points shy of knocking out the guy. And this is where it goes wrong. This is where everything goes horrifyingly wrong. Because we had been playing, keep in mind, this is a new group of players. This player has maybe played 8 or 9 sessions of D&D. So hardly anybody at this table has seen anything about what's about to happen. I had convinced them to run with lingering injuries, which is an optional rule in 5e, which is that there's a lingering injuries table, and it's basically like a system for wounds and scars and things like that. So you can have more dramatic injuries, because otherwise D&D is a system where you literally back whenever you take a long rest. So healing is kind of trivial. Yeah. As long as you make it through the fight, you'll be fine.
Yeah, for the most part.
And I was like, no, I kind of want this to be a little bit more desperate. And I pitched it to the players. And so lingering injuries has 3 triggers that you pick one of. Either it triggers on failing I think it's failing a death save by 5 or more, which basically means you'll hardly ever see it.
Yeah.
Because that requires a player to go down, then it requires them to fail a death save, and they have to fail it by this much.
Yeah.
You'll hardly. Then you can have it trigger on hitting 0 hit points. You'll see it more often.
Yep.
It'll come up. At this point, it'll hardly ever come up for the bad guys, if at all, because bad guys, when they hit 0, are usually dead.
Yep.
Or you have it trigger on criticals, on natural 20s. If it triggers on natural 20s, you will see lingering injuries. In my games, because of how often I run combat, you see them once every 1.5 sessions. So he had knocked out the family, but not the dude. Now they're in a fight. Now the dude is in bedclothes, so he's not wearing armor. He doesn't have weapons, but he's got his fists. And he goes in for a punch. Nat 20's my
Ah!
player. Nat 20's the player, and I'm like,
Oh.
that's a lingering injury. Roll on the lingering injuries chart. Now, I want to also preface, the lingering injuries chart is set, you roll a d20, and most of them, while they suck, can be healed fairly easily.
Okay.
Even lingering injuries can mostly be healed fairly easily, unless you roll a 1, a 2, or a 3. If you roll a 1, a 2, or a 3, you will lose, I think respectively, an eye, an arm, or a leg.
Oh, wow.
He rolls leg. and so I'm like, okay. And so what happens is basically this like, former brawler raider dude like drops low and punches him, and I'm like, and it dislocates your entire knee. It shatters your knee joint.
Oh, wow.
Completely. So he's now, and the disadvantages for having like a bum leg are bad. Like you like, if you try and like do more, your movement is like halved.
Ah, jeez.
Like if you do a dash, you automatically fall prone at the end of it. Like it's bad. It sucks.
Damn.
And it can't be healed by anything less than I think like a greater restoration or something.
Yeah, those are
like
easy to come by.
it's some like high level healing spell, which they did not have, and no one they had met so far in the game had.
Yeah, no.
And or regenerate. That's what it is. You have to regenerate.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah.
Just it's super high level, and so I was like, okay, so you are now missing a leg, and the combat keeps going, right? He keeps going, and eventually he knocks the dude out.
Okay.
Dude's not dead, but he like sleeps him again, knocks him out. But his leg is now completely screwed up. And again, back to this, like I was like, I already know the motivations for the characters in this scene, so I kind of know where they're gonna go. So he's like, all right, fine. He's like, I tie up the family. He's like, I tie up the guy, and I wake him back up because I'm gonna have my vengeance speech, right? I'm like, cool, and the player had prepped for this, and
wow.
but he's stressed now. But like, this is the thing, like he'd prepped, but he had not planned on getting a critical injury in this.
And now he has to deal with that injury. He's like, I gotta finish.
It's gonna last, right? Like he's gonna have to deal with that and find someone who can heal him. And I was like, okay, but he's stressed now, so he starts doing his like, you killed my family monologue. And I already knew the motivation for this dude, and so he gets to the end of his monologue, and he's like, tell me why you did it. Tell me why. And I had the guy the guy is just like, man, I don't even remember your family. He's like, there were so many villages. He's like, I got out of the life, but look, I was a raider for years. He's like, I don't know who you are. I don't know who your family was. I'm sure I did kill them. I killed a lot of people.
Oh wow.
and he's like, but look, I gave it all up. I moved here to not be that guy anymore, right? And I think had the previous combat not occurred the way it did, this is not what would have happened. But because this is now a tension situation, the player's like, he's like, I slit the throats of his family. He's like, I slit the throats of his family, and then I knock him out, and then I drag him outside, and then I burn his house to the ground.
Oh my god.
And I want to keep it. This is a good point to remind you. This is happening in front of the other players in the party.
Yeah.
And so they're like,
wow.
What? What are you doing? What? And even I am like, whoa, this went super dark, super fast. And as soon as he finishes, he's like, I burn down the house, and I leave him there, and I hobble off into the night, and I'm like, the flames rise, and you hobble off into the night, and I was like, and that's where we're gonna end it for this week. And then COVID came along and screwed
the whole thing. Oh my god.
But I did talk to the player afterwards. It was funny because an hour later, the player contacted me. It was like, I think I may have gone too far. I said, you know, man, I was like, it's okay. I was like, your character has definitely made a turn. I think your character is probably evil now. I think that's pretty reasonable. I was like, I want to clarify. Your character is evil. You're not evil. You've just done a really cool dramatic thing at the table, but your character is evil.
Yeah, just play evil.
It's like you've just murdered an innocent woman and her children. You know, in your vengeance quest, just to make this dude suffer. You are now evil.
Yeah. This is your MO for all the other bad guys.
Yeah, you are now on this arc, and we did get to talk a couple of times before COVID came up about what was going to happen next, and what I realized shortly thereafter, because the other players at the table were like, if we find this out, like, we gotta kill this.
Yeah.
We can't let this guy go. Like he's gone evil. And it was reasonable that they would find out because he's gonna hobble back to them, and they're gonna say, "Dude, what happened to your knee?" He's gonna have to figure that out. And I had talked to him about ways about getting around that and how he would try and hide it. And I realized right before we would have had our next session, right when COVID was ramping up, that there is like a deity in my world who is a deity of vengeance and fire.
Oh, shit.
And I told him, I was like, after a certain perspective, a chaotic evil deity of vengeance and fire. And I was like, from a certain perspective, you have just committed a great act of vengeance and evil and consecrated it in fire. This deity may assume you have just made an offering.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's like, what? Oh, cool.
And it might be willing to heal your leg in exchange for your extended servitude. You finish your vengeance quest because it likes that as long as you're dedicating it to him.
In this manner.
Yeah. I was like, so, if you want to do that. And he was like, yeah, that sounds cool. And then COVID happened. And I told him, once COVID happened and the game ended, I messaged him and I was like, well, look, here's the thing. I was like, we're not going to ever get to finish this game. I was like, but in my settings, like, player characters continue on. They continue to be NPCs. And I was like, so now in my game, there is this, like, a herald of this god who's wandering around, who is your character, still on his vengeance quest.
It's like a preacher character.
Yeah, I was like, so that'll come up. You'll exist in my game. You'll probably show up for some of my other players at some point.
That's fun.
Yeah. It was.
He just
like and it was such a hard, fast turn, but it was like, man.
I wonder when he made that decision, like in that moment. You think?
Oh, it was definitely.
Right?
Yeah, he clearly did not go into that situation. He had literally. We had talked about it right before the game. He had not planned to do that. But that combat went so badly.
Oh, wow.
It was so brutal, and I kind of envision it like you've seen Breaking Bad, some of Breaking Bad.
Yeah, parts of it.
So the very first guy in Breaking Bad that Walter White kills is like a dude in his basement that has like a bike lock around his neck, and it's that like he's a struggle to strangle the dude, and I'm like, I envision that combat in my game as being equally brutal. It's this horrifying, like, it's not cool violence. It's ugly, unpleasant violence. And I kind of envisioned that as being sort of how that worked. And just like, and just that just sent him over the edge. Like he was a chaotic neutral character, and he is now chaotic evil.
I'm glad that player recognized that I think I went too far.
Yeah. I think it was like the shocked expressions from the other players of just being like, oh my. And he came back later and said, I think I went too far. I was like, it happens. Like, the good thing is, like, you didn't go too far in terms of, like, your interactions with other players.
Yeah.
You just made a very dramatic change to your own character within the context of this story, and because that's not harming the fun of the table, like, you've enhanced the game. Like, that's amazing. That's cool drama. Like, I told him I was like you're a very new player, but that's the hardest fastest heel turn I've ever seen at a table, and it was I think it's great. Like I think that's amazing. So, and I'm like he doesn't know it, but that's gonna be my story now for like a really great player moment. Like I'm like this dude, look at this thing.
So in the scene, like he just like.
Yeah, he was completely inhabiting, and he was one of my more like. He was one of my players who was more into the RP side of things.
Yeah.
Like he really thought about his character. Like he was like, "Oh, I'm a bard, and in 5e you can have focuses for your casting, right? So like if you're a wizard, it'd be like a wand or a crystal or whatever." So his focus as a bard, normally bards would use instruments. His casting focus is a book of poetry that his wife gave him, and I'm like. Dude, that's good. That's really good. That's so good. He's like, it's not a standard focus. I was like, I don't care. That's great.
Just go with it. That's a good one.
That's perfect for your character,
especially for the turn.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's so good. Yeah, like it works so well. It was one of those scenes that like when I tell it afterwards, it sounds like it was planned to make this dramatic moment, but this was a thing that naturally happened at the table and was great.
It sounds like he unwittingly knew he the heel turn. He planted it way early.
Yeah, right.
He didn't realize it. Yeah, it's like
it feels like he knew, and he wanted to make it happen, but nope. He had planned to go a different way. Like he was really not sure up until the game, and then in the game he'd like, I'm definitely going to do it this way. I'm going to get my vengeance, but I'm not going to be a bad person.
Yeah.
And then that session happened, and it's like, nope. Turns out.
Turns out you have a short temper.
Right, yeah.
And you go to 11 right away.
Mm-hmm. Oh, gosh.
Oh, no.
Why is my phone going off? Sorry.
That's not good. Is it important?
I don't even know why I had that alarm. No, it's not. It's definitely not. Like I think it's just my standard like nightly alarm or whatever.
Oh yeah, because you live a weird schedule.
I do. Yeah, I live a weird schedule, but yeah. So yeah, it was a good. It was good times. Yeah. Good times.
I think after that point, the character's like, well, now I dress in all white, with black, or all in black with white makeup.
Right.
Everything has a bat motif for no reason. Or like a vampire motif with like leather. Oh, what's that we used to joke around with? It's always like black, like purple velvet and a blacklight like wolf poster.
Yeah.
And like pewter skulls and pewter dragons.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, I envision like like all of a sudden like that dude's like background music just all becomes like Smashing Pumpkins or something. Like,
A lot of violin.
Yeah. A lot of violin.
Yeah. That's a good one.
A lot of violin.
So he was new to the game? Like he just hasn't been playing for long?
He played a little bit before my game.
Okay.
But not much. Like he said I think he had played before that game. He said he'd played he'd played in like a handful of one shots, but like less than 10 sessions.
Okay.
Literally less than 10 sessions of D&D, and this was probably the 6th or 7th session of my game.
Okay.
That this happened.
Wow. Okay.
That for him that he was playing it, because he joined at like the midpoint, and yeah, like he went whole hog into it, and I'm so sad that we never got to resolve it like at the table what the fallout was. But that's okay because he's an NPC in the world now. Like
he's part of it.
Now he's just going to be a really scary, edgy NPC that's going to come up, and I'm sure at some point later on people are going to be like, "Wow, this guy's got a really comedically dark backstory." And I'll be like,
nope.
"No, this happened at the table."
I hope the player like takes this moment and does it again later.
I hope so too.
And just amp up the drama.
Yeah. Just make it more. Sorry if you hear my cat. He's wanting attention. So
that's what a cat does. Your cat's very friendly though.
He is very friendly. He's a very chatty boy. But yeah.
So do you like the online gaming stuff at all?
Yeah. I mean, like basically all tabletop now has gone online for most people, I think. Although it's wild from the D&D Reddit, and this is something that I was already seeing, but now I'm seeing it basically constantly. Is people talking about starting up games with their families?
Yeah, it's becoming more
it's
and more.
Usually, and people are like, and what's wild is like it's not just like people and their siblings.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost always it's like, yeah, actually, I'm running my first game for my sister and my dad and my mom and my granddad.
Wow.
And I'm just like, man, that's wild. That is so wild to me. I think it's cool. I think it's really cool, but I'm just like, ooh, that's baffling.
Well, we come from a generation that still remembers the Satanic Panic and the Jack Shit books. Where it was D&Ds are turning kids into satanic worshippers that sacrifice things in the basement.
Right. Or like you get so into your character that like the character dies and like you gotta commit suicide. There's a Tom Hanks movie of that. Like,
yeah.
I can't remember what it's called. There's a Tom Hanks movie that's literally about. It's like a D&D PSA.
Yeah.
Oh hush, buddy. Where are you?
Cat's like, no,
Sorry.
people don't do that. So there was a time when Dungeons and Dragons was like a scourge of the nation, right up there with the pot and the sex whores.
Yeah. Well, the standard like horror movie sins.
Yeah.
Premarital sex and drugs. But yeah, it's like online gaming is fun. There's definitely some loss. Like there is the immediacy of playing at a table, and being able to see your players' faces and having that real time reaction and kind of the airspace between you and another human being.
That's true.
I think does lend a certain. Oh, hello, cat! Don't get in front of the camera, buddy.
People want to see the cat. That's how it works.
Oof.
That's part of the.
Here.
It's kitty.
Here's. Hello, kitty. All right, come over here. You sit there.
It's like I think that's normal for every Zoom meeting now in the corporate world.
Oh yeah, you gotta have a cat that jumps in front of you.
If the other coworkers hear about your pet, that you have a pet, like bring it up. We have to see it.
Yeah, you have to show them. Yeah. But yeah, like
it's different. Like
it's different, but it's workable, and there are some things about it I like better. Because there are things that I get to do in my online games, like my current home game has a fair degree of like portents and like dreams of destiny and fate. And what I like to do for those is I will pre-write out those dreams because I know what they're going to be about. And when we go into a scene in the game, whenever I know one player is going to have downtime while I'm doing a scene with other players, I will send that player that scene so that they can read it while this is going.
That makes sense.
Instead of engaging with something while I'm doing something. It's also nice for things like, I can send players notes mid-session, and it's completely on the DL. Like, no one else in the party knows it, and I can just say, like, he's the one. I can do some dramatic.
That's the part of it. It's hard to, like, play that in a live session.
Right, yeah. It's hard to play it off where no one will notice it without, seeing you do it. Yeah, mm-hmm. Whereas, in an online game, like, who knows? Like, maybe I'm typing to another player. Maybe I'm just looking up the next encounter stats. Yeah. Who can say? Like, you can hear me typing, but what am I doing?
Oh, you gotta get like a nice soft pad. Don't get a mechanical keyboard. Just clack, 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 clack.
Oh man, I want one of those. Like, I don't have one, but I want a super clacky mechanical keyboard.
It's like the physicality part of it is very satisfying.
I have like a particular kind of switch I want. Even like I know the sound I want. I know which keyboard I want, but it's a little pricey. And I'm just like, I don't know if I want to drop $80 on a keyboard, but I know the one that like makes the noise I want. Like it's a very particular clack.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
I guess it also helps now that all the books are digital, so you're not. Where you play with your friends, like, I'll bring a duffel bag full of books.
Yeah, so 5e for D&D has done a thing. You can't get the books legally in PDF, but if you're using a third-party service like Roll20 or D&D Beyond, you can buy the license for the books through that service, which is effectively like having a PDF. But you do have to have an internet connection to access it.
It's a model that makes a lot of sense in the modern world.
It is, and I will say, like, stuff like what I do like about those services is that, like, for example, for D&D Beyond, they have content sharing. So if you set up a campaign, and then you have players join, and you turn on content sharing, anyone who has any book unlocked is now sharing that content with the whole campaign. Just like you would if you had different players at a table who bought different books.
Makes sense.
I was like, that's a fantastic kind of life thing. And so I have, like, one of my players, he dropped a crazy amount of money and bought, like, a full bundle on D&D Beyond, which is basically literally all the books that have been released up to that point for 5e.
Oh, wow.
And so yeah, so, like, if I want to, I can just troll through those books and look at them and be like, ooh, okay, that's cool. Ooh, maybe we'll use that. And, you know, so it's really cool. Like, it's really nice to have that functionality. And I do like, you know, having the digital stuff too for things like D&D Beyond's character sheet's great, because when you have the character sheet up in front of you, you can, anything on the sheet, literally anything, any stat, any weapon, any whatever, if you hover over it and click, it will have a little pop-up that tells you what it does.
Thank God.
And it's cross-linked, and, like, so it's like, you're like, what the hell is intelligence? And you click it, and it says, this is what intelligence is. This is how you use it. What is this weapon? Click. It's this, and it extends it out and gives it to you, and it's great for onboarding new players.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, the world is
so
intimidating.
good.
I remember getting into these.
Like,
Risk was a big one. Playing a high level D&D was another big one, because he brought all the books. So I was like, well, fuck.
Yeah.
And it's just too much.
For new players, for the new players in the university game, that was the thing that intimidated them the most. They're like, it looks like it's a lot of rules, and I was like, it is. I'm not going to make you read any of them.
Yeah.
And they'd be like, what? And I was like, no, I'm gonna walk you through building a character, because that's a little complicated.
Yeah.
I was like, but as soon as you're done with that character, we're just going to start playing, and whenever you want to do something that requires a rule, I will then teach you the rule once we're playing.
Yeah.
Because then it has context.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not just making you read a reference manual and kind of like if I told you here's the magic system for Final Fantasy VII, but didn't let you play the game.
Yeah.
Like, it would be incomprehensible. It's just numbers and charts, and it means nothing.
Newbies should come at level 1 anyways.
Yeah, I was starting them at, like, level 3,
okay.
So they would have just enough stuff that they would get, like, their main class abilities, and they would have at least cool stuff to do every round, but not be ultra powerful, like, and not, like, it wouldn't take 10 hours to make a freaking character. And so I would just say this, like, I was like, nope, we're just going to start playing, and I will tell you once we get to a rule, I'm going to introduce that rule to you, and you will learn that rule in a context that will then help you learn it. And it worked. It worked really well. Like, it onboarded players really fast, and it got several of my players to start looking at the rules when the game wasn't running.
Oh, okay.
Which is the best. Like I would have players come to me later and be like, so I was looking at this, and what does this mean?
Yeah.
And I'd be like, this is great. Like, this is exactly what it should do. And it's because it links them in. Again, like, it loops back to the storytelling. Like, it links them in to the narrative first.
Because they can look for things they can do.
Right. And they're already invested.
Yeah.
Like, the investment's already there. Now you just got to do is maintain that and build their toolkit. And it works really well.
That's good. Yeah, Sounds like a nice way to. That's why it's so goddamn popular now.
Yeah. There's so many like YouTube channels.
I saw a webcomic and it was like an old person talking to like a young kid. It's like, how's that Fortnite game you play? He's like, I don't play Fortnite anymore. He's like, what do you play? He's like, D&D. And they're like, what?
I saw that. Yes, I saw that comic. Yeah, and it's so true.
It's pretty true. My stepson has said he's stepped out of Fortnite, and he's back in Minecraft. He's a Gen Z kid, but
sure.
but he had a D&D club at his school.
Oh, that's awesome!
Like right off the bat, I was like, oh, I remember you had a game club that had D&D things, but it was under like video games.
Yeah, it was neat, like running the game at the university because you and I would probably think of D&D as being like an inherently nerdy hobby. Mm-hmm. But several of the people in my game were not nerds.
Yeah.
Definitively not nerds. And had heard of D&D, and then had heard of it and were interested in it, which I was just like, that's baffling. And then they started playing, and they got it. They picked it up really fast and got really into it. Oh, hello, kitty.
I had a couple of coworkers from my old joint that were interested. One was kind of like super hardcore video game nerd. Mm-hmm. Another one was like played video games, but he was more of he's an initial DU race kid that grew up. And so like kind of nerdy but kind of like do bro at the same time. I mean, he was like, how would I play? I keep hearing about it, and I guess at this point people are like, it's fucking popular. It's been around for this long, so there has to be a thing.
I saw a thing about it. I think it was Matt Colville, who's a YouTuber / D&D streamer person I follow, and he was talking about this, and this is I'm putting a couple of things he said together from different streams, but I think they're very accurate. One of them is that like it gets people back to human-to-human interaction in a way that a lot of other modern hobbies do not.
Oh, yeah.
Which is one thing I think has always been a strength of D&D, or tabletop role-playing.
Yeah, as a whole.
And the other thing that I thought was really insightful as an observation is that you cannot like tabletop RPGs ironically.
No.
You can't like be like, yes, I'm just playing this, because it's so nerdy. Like, you can't sarcastically enjoy a tabletop RPG as you're playing it.
Yeah.
You can't do it for the yucks. Like, you have to commit to some element of it. Either the fact that you're at a table playing with friends, or the fantasy of it, or whatever. Like, but it is understood at a baseline level that there's something about doing this hobby that you enjoy because you're going to spend the next 4 hours doing it.
At the minimum.
Right? Like, yeah, you are not there for a limited engagement.
Sometimes there's a food break and then a snack break. Like, it goes.
Yeah.
It goes.
Yeah. It does. I'm older now, so like most of my sessions are very like narrowly bounded, like 4 hours.
Yeah.
Like that is once we hit the 4 hour mark, it's like, all right, we gotta get out. But like, yeah, like I remember the olden days of 8 hour sessions and having the pizza break in the middle, and some days I really miss those because that was great.
Yeah, you get to dive into something for a long period.
And like. Yeah. Like, I remember like there was a summer, like either my junior or senior year of high school, where we spent most of the summer at the University Union Center in College Station, and we literally spent 3 to 4 days a week of that entire summer for 7 hours a day. Playing RPGs. Like that was the foundation of the Trinity game I ran. Like, and that's why it seemed like it had so much depth to it, because literally we probably played we played hundreds of hours in that one summer, and then everything else cascaded out of that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because when we played the adventure game was supposedly like the backstory to the Trinity game, and
my adventure game wasn't, but other people's. Yeah. There was some of those.
Y'all played for a bit. I remember going in. It's like there's a lot here already, and all the other players knew too, and I was like, what in the world is going on here? But that's cool though. Like it adds a lot of automatic flavor text.
Yeah, and I tend to run like once I get into a system and build a setting or build my story, right? My baseline tendency is that any game that happened that happened at my table counts, and even games that die.
Okay.
So like so if a game dies, and we just never play again, okay, that game still happened. And the next game I run will be informed in some way by that game. Like those characters might still be around. That situation might still be around. If they didn't resolve it, hey, maybe it got worse. And hey, you're the new party that has to deal with this thing that killed the old party.
There's a crazy dude on a revenge quest with the gods backing.
Right. Yeah, there's a crazy dude on a revenge quest with the gods backing him, and that dude's going to come up again. And like keeping that consistency to it is cool because like it allows players to engage in the world building. Like, you as players get to say, oh, well, if we make a huge world changing change, like that's going to stick in Jake's game. That will keep going, and other people will have to deal with it. Yeah, that's the idea. That's the whole point. Like,
it's not.
And so now I guess I have like 4 settings that are kind of like that. Where they have that kind of backstory.
That's all we want to do at the end of the day is make a deep impact in a world. If it has to be a fantasy world, so be it.
Yeah. Hey, like it's that thing, like, people who do a lot of tabletop RPGs, whenever they tell those stories to other people later, they don't talk about it in the third person. They talk about it in first person. I did this. Me and my friends, we went in this dungeon, and we, and I fell in this hole, and there was a gelatinous cube that came onto me, and like they talk about it as if it happened to them because it did happen to them. Like that is a real experience they had, just because they happen to have it using dice and whatever instead of literally being in a catacomb.
I remember if you get the combat situation just right, it feels panicky. Like the tension rises, and you're like, ah, shit. Especially like if you get the bad end of the initiative roll.
Yeah.
Like,
you can. Yeah, you can make it feel desperate. You can make scenes feel creepy and horrifying. Yeah. You can make scenes feel happy and awesome. Like there's like, and I think all the best moments in my games have been stuff like that. Have been. Like I said, like the gladiator fight was so good, not because mechanically it went a long time and it was fun. Like I said, it was good because it felt like a hard fight.
Yeah.
Like the players felt desperate all the way through it. They felt like they were on the back foot, and they had to. It was like a Jackie Chan fight. You start at the bottom and you've got to punch your way up to the top. Like. And that's how they felt throughout the whole fight. And so when it was done, everybody was like, oh, man, like, holy crap. And I was like, that's it. Like...
Everybody's character is like low HP. They're crossed over all their spells. Like, what do I got fucking left? That one hasn't recharged yet.
Out of, I think it was like 3 or 4 people in that combat, and 3 of them went down. Oh. It came down to the last player... and the bad guy, and they did a great thing. Like I said, it was a gladiatorial arena, and he dropped the 3rd one of them, and was about to coup de grace them.
Oh wow!
But I had told them beforehand. I was like, "This is a gladiator. He's the head gladiator, so he plays to the crowd." And so the player did this awesome thing, and they were low on HP, and they were far away from the guy. They were super distant, and they were like, "Okay, I taunt him," and I'm like, "Wait. You're not finished yet. You've still got one more person to deal with." And I was like, roll your performance check. and they rolled it, and they did a really great job in their performance check. And I was like, yep. He's like, he's a gladiator. He's like, you're right. I do have one more, and like rushes at them, and they like that was the last. And if they had gotten hit, they would have gone down too. But they make the last shot and drop the dude, and that was the end of combat. And it was super great, like picture perfect ending, like exactly how you want it to be in a game. So yeah.
So we ran 2 hours, I think, because we did the hour in the first part, or 45 minutes in the first part. Now we're at an hour. So let's wrap this up.
Okay.
I think we hit some high points. Any tips on storytelling? Like if we get like a newbie DM.
Oh yeah, like newbie DMs. Like I go back to is like the you don't have to predict everything your players are going to do. In fact, you won't be able to. Don't try. Figure out what your NPCs are doing and what motivates them, because that's a much simpler problem.
Yeah.
And once you know that, then what your players do, all you have to do is react as that NPC and say, my plans have been foiled. How shall I get my plans back on track? And then just do that. And that's a much simpler problem to solve than to say, oh my god, how, what if my players go this way or that way? Or, what if they take a left at 5th Street? I don't know what I'm going to do. And you're just like, no, you don't worry about that. Who cares if they take a left at 5th Street? What is your bad guy doing? What do they care about? And solve that problem, and your story is going to be, one, a lot more open-ended, and two, a lot more dynamic, while still being believable.
There you go. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Cool. So I'm going to stop the recording.